I've been doing a lot of research into quote unquote evil nature of human beings. And
Oh
when
yeah.
I'm going to qualify,
Okay.
I'm going to qualify that a little bit
Right.
because I want to
Okay. Yeah.
say I'm trying to come at it from a psychological point of view to understand so things like Milgram's experiments and Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment, and how people tend to be very easily able to access some very deep-seated evil just because someone in authority would tell an ordinary person to do something. People tend to gravitate towards that. Reading a book at the moment, Ordinary Men, which tracks the descent into evil of some
Sure.
ordinary policemen in 1942 Poland. So they were just ordinary guys with occupations
Right.
such as a barber and a teacher and a shop owner, and just random people mid to lower class who were drafted into the police services rather than the military because they were too old, or they were veterans of World War One, and they were there to keep the peace in Poland. And that quickly changed into the orders of the final solution. They had to go around killing men, women, children, old
Mm.
people, young, like just because they
Right.
were
Right.
told to do this sort of stuff. The majority, and I've got to say, it was about 80 to 90% of men did it. And there were about maximum 20% of people who refused to do any of that. I want to
Right.
understand from a transpersonal point of view, because we're talking about beautiful characteristics that we should all move towards. And I'm using that word should very purposely, that I think it
Mm.
presents a
Mm.
state that most people would benefit from. Does transpersonal psychology offer any explanations on this other, like as Jung would call it, this dark side, this shadow self of human nature? And
Sure.
and
Well, yeah. That's. I mean, people have written books, books about this, and I'm not sure whether I could sort of argue it succinctly.
well,
I think
give me your sense
yeah,
as a
yeah, humans beings. So there's two things I was thinking. We live in this duality and binary of good and evil, and the potential to be loving and potentially to be violent. And I think Goethe said something to the effect that there's no sin or no bad awful act that I'm not capable of committing myself. And I think
mm,
humans definitely have. It's just part of how we're made. In some sense, we have this potential to be both inherently evil and inherently good. Well, no, I won't say inherently evil. I think we're inherently good. Our deepest nature is good. And I think that transcends those experiments that you're talking about. If you're just using ordinary folks, I would say they haven't accessed their deepest nature. But we also have this potential, it's not inherent, but we have this potential to be evil or dark. And I don't think most humans are created that way and not born that way. And they might have some sort of predispositions, but that's for another discussion. But why in
mm.
those experiments 80% of those folks in Poland acquiesced and became to whatever gods at Auschwitz or whatever they did?
Oh,
That's
they were
just
responsible for, it's under
yeah,
500,
sure, sure.
500 men were responsible for upwards of
Yeah,
80,000 deaths.
right, right. So
Yeah.
there's something. I think it's more interesting the 20% that didn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to trying to understand, because
Yeah. So
immediately,
I don't know off the top of my head at the moment exactly why that 80%. I've read about it, but it was years ago, in a sense of why there's 80%, why we can go into this sort of conformist and go along with,
yeah.
sort of a mob mentality, because they've done experiments about how groups of people get together, that they somehow lose their individual moral compass, their worldview, or their ethical stance, and they get swept away in a sort of a collective thinking way of being.
Mm.
And so that possibly would happen with these guards, that they end up moving in more of a collective perspective rather than their individual points of view. And if they did, maybe there's various reasons, if they had to they were given a choice, if you don't do this,
Well,
you're going to die, that type of thing, but
so that's what some of them had recounted, which is very interesting. But not
right,
once has any judicial
right,
representatives found a case where a person who refused to do that was punished, but there was an expectation that they would be punished if they
right,
didn't go around with it. But let me give you something really interesting. At the beginning, their commander, a man called General Truck, he was torn up with the order that he received on high, and he had to communicate the order to his men. And he was saying, well, we have to go to this particular village, and we have to kill everybody that's there, men, kids, women, old people. And that has come up from high. But if you want to sit out, you can do it. I did the calculation. Of those people, there was only 2.5% of people who immediately said, "No, I'm not going to do it." 2.5%. And then between 10 and 20% afterwards, after that instruction, pulled out and they said, "No, we couldn't." So they found other jobs that they could do, like guarding the village or doing a few other things, rather than going there and point blank shooting people. I tend to disagree with your statement that we are inherently good. I thought that for quite a long time when I was doing my undergraduate and my graduate studies, where the humanistic approach was that all people have their inherent goodness within oneself. And then there's a whole bunch of research that I came about that people are predisposed, they tend to appear to be predisposed, I can't make a sweeping statement, to choose evil over good in these situations. More people would tend to choose the evil actions rather than the good actions. And so and that's why I want to understand from a transpersonal point of view, how do we get to this and how do we overcome this?
I read once just to be devil's advocate then to this research. There was research done around Gettysburg, the Civil War in the United States, famous battles in American history. And I don't know why they did it, but they worked out that when they were on that field at Gettysburg, they worked out somehow that 70% of the men in those armies fired above the heads of the enemy. After that, they worked out that they had to change the training tactics. The army had to change their training tactics because they had a choice. You see, it wasn't like it was hand-to-hand combat where your survival instinct's going to kick in. Well, if there's someone's coming at you with an axe or a sword, well, you've got to do something about it, right? So you're going to, your self-preservation is going to kick in. Whereas these guys, it seems like they had a choice whether they wanted to kill whether they were Confederate or the Unionists. They apparently 70% of them fired above the heads of the enemy. And so they, like I said, they changed.
That's interesting.
So what they did, they dehumanized the training. After that, they dehumanized the enemy. So they made them, in a way so that it was easier for you to kill somebody because they weren't human anymore. And so you make them the other as evil or something like that. And we do that quite cleverly these days with othering. That's one side. So whether I'm not disputing what you're saying either. Whereas the transpersonal
you can dispute it.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. So the transpersonal view is that the humanists and those experiments that are being done are all being done on the egoic personality level, and the inherent goodness hasn't been tapped into. If you're looking at people's developmental stage, that's why I was curious about the 2.5% or the 20% that you were talking about. What was the difference between them? You can be at different stages of development. And so somebody who's got, I would say those 2%, 2.5% or 20%, I'd be interested to know what their particular line of development, their moral development, how high that was compared to the other 90% odd percent or 80% that you were talking about in those experiments, where their developmental line was in this particular area, or were they just followed because they had other reasons why they thought it was okay to kill a whole bunch of people? Because I feel like at our deepest core level, when you're in pure love, you're not interested in killing people, you're not interested in hurting people, you're only interested in serving people. And that's a human developmental stage where you move from unconsciousness, consciousness to super consciousness, or selfishness to self to selflessness. You could say that's a developmental stage. Do you think the Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi or those kind of folks or anybody else, do you think they would have put their hand up and gone in to kill? So I'm giving those examples of people that, in my opinion, are more in contact with their deepest, truest nature.
Part of what psychologists do, and you know this, you try to get a general understanding of how people act within a particular domain from an experimental point of view, and then undertake those experiments, and you see where the bell curve sits, and you get rid of any outliers to make sure that doesn't skew the results, generally speaking, and then you want to make sure you present that forward. Now, one can use the example of Jesus of Nazareth, who's up there on the cross saying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know
Yeah.
what they're. And these are the guys who just put nails
Yeah.
in his hands. So there are always outliers out there, and it's good to remind ourselves that there is that opportunity, there is that way of
Yeah, that's right. And
this
it's the
is
same with Tibetan monks that have been tortured by the Chinese. Some of them survived, came away saying that they only had love and compassion for their torturers and saw them as, you know, as their teachers. I mean, to have that perspective and have that open-heartedness is, as you say, they're outliers, but they're outliers for me that show where the human potential is whether you're a Jesus or you're a Buddha or you're, you know, a Tibetan monk or whatever, whoever, you know, Mother Teresa or whatever it is, whoever you see as a significant figure, as a, you know, positive human figure, they signal where the potential is for me and you and most other humans on the planet. That's why they're here, I feel like, is they're living examples of what we're capable of. And that's what, bringing back to transpersonal psychology, is that's what I am curious about and passionate about and interested in, is that journey of discovery for people to see if they can tap into their own deepest nature and deepest potential. So we stop doing the atrocities that humans are really good at. If we survive, that's where humans are heading towards, is that, you know, that inherent potential. We're still relatively young species. If you look at the length of time Homo sapiens have been on the planet, it's only about 70,000 years that we've been around. And, you know, compared to the billions of years or whatever it is, hundreds of billions, I don't know, whatever it is, billion years that life's been on Earth, it's a blink of an eye. So we kind of have to cut ourselves some slack as well around, you know, the bad. There's a lot of good. I think people are more good than they are bad. And, you know, the evidence is we've got less wars now than we've ever had. And I'd like to sort of see the glass half full on that perspective. Yeah.